Hey there, Bill.
Hi, Deb. How are you?
Good, good. Hello, everyone. Bill, I love your backdrop. The Statue of Liberty is brilliant.
Just got to look after the dog.
That's fun. And hello, everyone else. I think we have, there are, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 15 people registered. So let's just give it a couple more minutes. We'll start at 7:05. Typical Jersey City fashion, we never start on time. We're just going to give that a little bit of a cushion. Hey there, Ron.
I need to get a fancy backdrop. I guess I have to ask my kids how to do that.
Go for it. Yeah, I love that Statue of Liberty background. Good one, Bill.
I'm going to try and block the light so it doesn't annoy people in their eyes.
Well, that'd be good for a start.
When I have the PowerPoint going, I guess you won't see that anyway.
Not so much.
Okay.
Okay, let's give it a couple more minutes here.
How are you, Dave?
I'm doing okay. Yourself?
No, not too bad. Haven't done many presentations since teaching, so it was fun putting it together.
Yeah, some of this is starting to kick up in how we want to have some of these community conversations. David, your white paper on what New Jersey Transit is doing with the Turnpike extension, that's something we can circle back on one of these monthly meetings to share with the public. There are evolving opportunities, Bill, to have some of these conversations. So a follow-up conversation, for example, what we hosted with Food and Water Watch, David Larrabee, one of our board members, has done an analysis and done all the math around what the options are around the New Jersey Transit proposal. So we can have an offline conversation about that, but there's lots of stuff that the public should be made aware of. And I think that these monthly Community Green Committee meetings are a good venue for that. So I hope the audience expands because there's lots to talk about.
Yes, I know.
Right?
We have very substantive meetings, but
extraordinary.
But very poor turnout, unfortunately. And
so we're building that up.
No reflection on our speakers.
Yeah, so everyone who's kind of attending, if you feel the same way, please share this with your circles. Right?
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm good, Bill. How you doing?
Good.
Great.
So I know Maggie. I don't know Sharuk.
Sharuk? No, I do not know Sharuk. Would you identify yourself? Who are you?
Yes, I'm a high school student.
You're very, very bad connection. Unfortunately, it's breaking up a lot. Sorry. We can't hear you.
Okay.
You could put something in the chat if you wanted.
Yeah. And Melissa, nice to see you too. That's great.
And
okay,
Maggie,
why don't we start here? Bill, I shared with you, Ron's background, and I'd like for you to maybe introduce him, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this tonight. So why don't you kick off, and then I'll follow you before I introduce Ron.
Well, I'm going to embarrass myself by saying I don't remember what Ron's background. So why don't you take it over? But I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us, and especially you, Ron.
Oh, I'm happy to. Thanks.
Yeah, so just quickly, what we're trying to get to here is a primer for the community on air quality and how to think about it, how to understand some of the reporting that's going on about it. You know, a couple of years ago, SJC, and this is part of our tree canopy restoration focus. You know, we come at this from a public health perspective, and we did a heat watch and air quality study, and the air quality data that came back, which is affected by extreme heat, makes air quality worse in Jersey City. But the air quality data that we collected came back inconclusive. So we took another run at this, and we engaged the health department for the city of Jersey City, went into a grant and proposed to the EPA that they might fund us to do some air quality monitoring. And, you know, the worst, so to speak, neighborhoods of Jersey City, which are considered the environmental justice neighborhoods, or that environmental justice corridor of Jersey City. And we were awarded $500,000. We were told we got this grant in October, and we're waiting to kick off this project. And tonight is the first conversation letting people know that we got this grant, that we're about to do a lot of air quality monitoring, what the context of that is, and maybe how to start to think about some of the data or the, you know, the information that we want to educate the public with. So Ron is an SJC board member, but he's also, you know, before he was a high school teacher for 20 years, he was an air quality, you know, expert working with, you know, different firms and working for the government and employed by private industry. So we are graced with the fact that he knows so much about this stuff and can educate us all. So tonight is just like the first conversation that, and I'm just going to share my screen here, that follows up on a visual that I've shared before, which is, you know, what we call now, because we're all so educated about this, at least some of us, Asthma Alley in Jersey City, right? So the worst rate of asthma prevalence in Hudson County. And when, you know, while that red area is the corridor where it is most prevalent, the dark orange and light orange on the west side of Jersey City, where you have a lot of the impact, if you will, coming over from across the Hackensack River, Kearney, Newark, Elizabeth, that industry and the commercial activity over there, also inclusive of the incinerators that are burning and the winds that are pushing that across the Hackensack into Jersey City, are creating these public health issues. By virtue of this grant that we received, we're obligated now to educate the community, you know, every month now for the next 3 years. So we're just going to introduce tonight some of the characteristics of what you might be, you know, sort of pointed at. You know, some of this stuff looks like graphs, some of it looks like pictures, some of it looks like, you know, statistics and whatnot. We're going to try tonight to educate you how to interpret some of the information that's going to come at you over the next 3 years. Okay, so Ron, I'm going to stop sharing here. I'm going to give this over to you.
Okay, thank you. So let me share here, and
Okay. So there's a lot of text and data. Ron is going to run through this stuff. We want you to come away with some high points, some basic definitions, some basic understanding. Don't feel obligated to take in every piece of what's being conveyed to you in these slides. The presentation will be made available to you, after tonight, and then you can digest further, but we're going to sort of rifle through this. We only have an hour.
Right. So you can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Thank
All right.
you.
So as Deb said, I'm going to try and highlight a little bit about how air quality is regulated, just so you know who the players are and what was done going way back into the 50s to start regulating, controlling air quality, try and clean up the air quality in this country. So basically, there we go. So 1955 is when the Air Pollution Control Act came out, and that was before I got involved in air quality. So I don't really know, I never really heard much about it. So that was the first time, though, that the Congress started looking at, okay, we've got some air quality problems. Let's take a look at what we can do. Most of you are aware of what's called the Clean Air Act, as I've listed as CAA. And in 1963, that's when it was signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson. And basically, just real quick, Congress establishes a law, and now the law sets the framework up. And now you have to give an agency to write regulations to enforce the intent of that law. So it takes quite a few years before that really happens. And so 63, 67, things didn't really start getting into place. But these are all the hurdles that had to be done. First, you have to identify what pollutants are of concern. There's a lot of different air pollutants, different chemicals. So where do we focus? And so that had to be established. Then you have to say, okay, let's look at all kinds of white paper studies that have been done and figure out what levels do we have to regulate these pollutants at to protect public health. Then you have to find out, okay, well, now we've got these levels. What do these levels look like in this country? Are a lot of areas in the country too polluted that were causing health impacts, or a lot of them are clean? So that means you need to start collecting data. And you have to start looking at, okay, once we started collecting data, who's the sources of these air pollutants? And then you have to identify, okay, now we know what the sources are. How do we regulate these pollutants? And then, okay, how do we enforce these regulations? And how do we fund these programs? So a lot had to be done, and it took quite a few years before the regulations started getting put in place. And you'll see there were a number of amendments to the Clean Air Act to get us to where we are now. So 1970 was really when we started getting regulations on air emission sources. So they first looked at industrial sources, agricultural sources, and then they said, oh, wait a minute, we have to look at motor vehicle emissions as well, because that's also a major source. And we have to regulate them as much as these power plants and other stationary sources. That's when they started putting emission limits on vehicles based on their age and regulating, that industry as well. And as I said, as far as the states go, we had to establish plans. So the federal government can't do all this themselves. So they wanted to relegate it down to the states, and states usually like to say, okay, this is our state, federal government, we would like to really control what's going on here. But they had to take these national standards that were set up by the federal government. So it'd say like SO2, the standard is that in the state, it can't be above a certain level. So the state.
Explain, people don't know what SO2 is.
Okay, so the first thing that happened is what they set up what's called the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Now the states have them as well as the state ambient air quality standards. And the pollutants they decided to focus on were, if you look down in here, photochemical oxidants like ozone, carbon monoxide, which is CO, nitrogen oxides, mostly NO2, which is nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, which is SO2, and then particulate matter, PM. So those are the primary pollutants. And there are other that they've added since then, hazardous air pollutants, they call HAPs, and volatile organic compounds, which is a subset of that. So that's what they focused on.
So lots of acronyms. So
Yeah.
nitrogen, oxide, NOx, sulfur dioxide, SOx,
Right.
the ambient air quality standards. We have NACs. This is a crazy acronym ridden conversation.
Right.
So again, you'll pick this up after reviewing the PowerPoint afterwards, but Ron is just trying to give you some highlights here.
So at first, many of these regulations are going to be enforced. So the EPA under William Rickelhaus was the agency that was given the authority to control and write the regulations to enforce the Clean Air Act. So you've heard of that. Now in New Jersey, we have the NJDEP, which is the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. New York has NISDEC, which is New York State Department of Environmental Commission. So there's a lot of different names for the individual states. So in 1977, the amendment then was focusing on non-attainment regions. So let's talk about what that is. So when you set the standards of, say, 50 parts per million or whatever it is, the state has to collect data. So it takes a number of years to collect enough data to say, okay, wow, it's 100 parts per million background levels right now in the state. We're not in compliance. That means then they have to set up a plan, state implementation plan. How are they going to clean up the air quality? That means they need to get more enforcement, more stringent regulations to go after the industries to reduce the emissions, to clean up the air and get it to within these limits within a certain amount of time. And they had to have a plan in place. So that's what
that's the difference between attainment and non-attainment, right?
Right. So non-attainment means it does not comply with the air standards, and attainment means it does. So I'm going to show you what it looked like in New Jersey from the start into where it is now. So in 1990, Clean Air Act amended. So you probably remember, some of you, this acid rain became a big issue. And then also destruction of the ozone layer in the stratosphere. And that's back when we had to get rid of freon and all those chlorofluorocarbons because they were destroying the ozone layer, which protects us from ultraviolet rays from the sun. And I'll describe the difference between ground level ozone, which is dangerous for us to breathe, and stratospheric ozone, which is important to protect us from ultraviolet rays. And then a lot of other regulations were put in place so one point we have to decide, okay, we've got these pollution sources, major sources, they're big problems, especially coal-fired power plants. And some of these plants want to, grow and get larger. Well, if they do, then I think I have it on the next slide. No, I think I had it back in here. But anyway, then if you want to grow, that means you're making money. So what you have to do is now comply with whatever the existing baseline sources have. So a new source that's built has to meet a new source performance standard and best available control technology. So that means that if there's controls out there that you can apply, then you need to put them in. This is the way we're going to start cleaning up the air quality. And if there's an old source, we want to not necessarily get rid of them, but if you want to keep up with the Joneses and still make that power, or you want to make steel or whatever it is, if you're going to change your plant because it's 30 years old, well, obviously you need to do some repairs. if those repairs are major, you need to come up to speed with the new source performance standards, meaning you have to clean up your act. And that's how these state implementation plans and the federal laws got the air quality to get better.
So essentially, you had regulations coming in.
Mhm.
You had the evolution of these power plants, whether they were being upgraded, reinvested in, mostly fossil fuels that were unregulated, that were needing to come online and meet compliance standards. So you have this tension, right, that existed over a 20, 30-year period.
Right.
Right. So fast forward now, where are we at, Ron?
Okay, so again, then what happened was the greenhouse gas with climate change became an issue, and that's when the whole world decided with the Paris Treaty to start cutting back on carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, which was not a regulated pollutant, because carbon dioxide was not considered to be a health hazard. It is a hazard that, if it's too high a level, you could die from asphyxiation, but just breathing it in the air, there's lots, CO2 wasn't considered a major health hazard. But that got back down again when Trump was in administration. You want to know more about—
So what does that mean? Are you saying that carbon dioxide became a greenhouse gas regulated emission back in 2017?
So back in 2011, the world decided that they would try and cut back on carbon dioxide emissions because it's a greenhouse gas, but it was never regulated under the Clean Air Act as a pollutant that had an adverse health issue, meaning that it's going to cause me to get asthma or asphyxiate, or some kind of health issues associated with breathing it. It's a problem.
Is it regulated today?
It's not necessarily regulated. It is.
That's interesting.
It is set up as we want to reduce it by a certain time frame to prevent global warming. It's not a health issue. It's not regulated as a health issue.
Well, that's curious. And what folks should know is that all this stuff is very political in terms of what you're going to regulate and how you're going to regulate industry. Obviously, that's not news to people on this call. So fast forward, where are we at with some of the oversight?
So this was just a summary of that. These are the pollutants. If you look in the second bullet down here, that SO2 is sulfur dioxide, nitric oxides, meaning it could be NO2 or NO or NO3, volatile organic compounds, that's like your solvents and benzene, toluene, xylene, all those.
Yeah, nobody knows what that is, Ron. Okay. So the idea here is that industry is creating a very toxic atmosphere. These all have names: right. SO2, SOx, NOx, NO2, volatile organics, VOX. I mean, carbon organics,
lead, PB is lead,
etc. But nobody knows what this means, Ron. Right? So all we want to say is that there are an extraordinary number of pollutants in the air that, in a controversial way, are at odds with regulatory.
Right.
Ron, if I could jump in.
Yeah.
I remember going to high school in New York City back in the mid 60s, how polluted the air seemed to be back then. Of course, there was a lot more manufacturing in the United States, including in New York City and New Jersey.
Right.
And it seems to me that the air is not nearly as polluted now. And I credit the Clean Air Act and all these subsequent pieces of legislation and regulation that, of course, the Trump administration tried to undermine as much as possible.
Yeah.
But am I correct in assuming that it does?
Absolutely, and I'll show you that. I've already discussed this other stuff here. This is just quick overview of, it's not just industrial sources. Cars are considered mobile sources.
Right.
You know, big problem was wood stoves. You go up into these back areas, just go up the Hudson River there, and you can't breathe because they were unregulated. And then they came up with regulations to control emissions from that. So as more and more, we got to learn more and more about what's causing this air pollution, and it started to shift from this source to that source being a concern. They're all natural as well. Volcanoes, we don't have them around here, but just dust from wind-blown dust and things like that
Sure.
become a problem. And again, when we talk about volatile organic compounds, indoor air quality has become a major issue. It's not regulated under the Clean Air Act, but it is of concern, and it is regulated under OSHA and whatnot for workplaces. But you know, you buy new furniture, new cars. Oh, I love the smell of a new car. Well, those are volatile organic compounds coming out of the adhesives or the coatings, and it's not good stuff. You may like the smell of it.
But Ron, that acronym, what kind of organic compounds is it? What's the V?
Volatile means it
Volatile?
Volatile, yeah, volatile means it evaporates at ambient temperature and pressure. So
The VOCs, volatile organic compounds.
Right. And many of these are carcinogenic.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's a great example when you buy a new car, right? What that upholstery is treated with.
Right.
Huge.
Yeah. So these are
that's the best common example.
So I'll touch a little bit on that later, but not a lot. And so VOCs fall under hazardous air pollutants. And if you look, mobile sources is one of the biggest sources. So cars are 50% of the emissions more than industry. And that even though we're regulating cars and lowering the emissions, we're putting so many more cars on the road that it causes congestion, and cars sitting in traffic at, you know, idling are giving off more emissions. So that is our biggest problem right now. So as far as showing where we are, you can see these are your criteria pollutants: ozone, PM. I'll talk about what 2.5 and 10 means.
What does PM mean?
PM is the particulate matter. That means basically dirt, dust, but liquid droplets are regulated as PM as well. So some of the standards were changed. You can see 79, this one was dropped. But ozone, with the 1997, we are in non-attainment in New Jersey. I'm just listing New Jersey. Means we don't comply with the federal standards. So the air quality.
So roll up this whole slide, which is not something anybody is actually going to read and understand. What does this slide mean?
So what the slide's showing you is ozone is non-attainment. So New Jersey does not comply with the national ambient air quality standards for ozone. PM, it does. Attainment, maintenance. What maintenance means is that at one time it didn't. So the air was dirtier, but it has cleaned up, and now it does comply with the standards. So you can see attainment, they're all attainment. And again, attainment maintenance, same thing with CO. It used to not be in compliance with that. It's cleaned up.
Carbon monoxide.
Right, carbon monoxide and nitrogen dioxide.
All these go past these slides. So all this means that over time, what these toxic air emission characteristics have done, because of the oversight, they've gotten better, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's basically all that was. So does anyone have any questions on that?
Does everybody understand what ozone is, what particulate matter is, some of these things that are being overseen by regulatory authorities? That was that first part. Like, some of this stuff is being regulated, a good portion of it. It's gotten better. There are talking points here, a lot of acronyms. When people report to you, hey, here are the characteristics of your air quality in Jersey City, we basically want to have people understand that there are these things they should be concerned about, like ozone and PM or particulate matter.
Right.
And, you know, that we're going to look at this stuff now. It's gotten better over time, but it's still a problem, right?
Right. So to go a little further, let's talk about what ozone actually is. So ozone is chemically 3 oxygen molecules combined. So it's odorless, it's colorless, and it mixes with a lot of pollutants, and it's called smog. That's what we as lay people know. So when you used to see those brown clouds along the horizon, that was ozone mixed with other chemicals. So high ozone, what's the problem with it? It can make it difficult to breathe in extremely high levels. It affects the lung cells, rendering them more susceptible. So it's harder for you to, you know, fight off exposure to other toxins and microorganisms. And again, to differentiate ozone in the stratosphere, we live in the troposphere. That's where we breathe. That's where weather is, and that's where
That's
we
down at the ground level.
ground level. So that ozone is harmful. We're breathing it. It's not good. Stratosphere, you're not breathing it, and it's necessary.
So above us,
Right.
way above us, it's protecting us.
Right. So that's
right. So there are 2 different kinds of ozone, not to be confused.
it's the same ozone, but we're not breathing it up there, so it's okay, and it's necessary. Right.
And it's protecting us
Right.
from what?
From ultraviolet rays. So ozone absorbs ultraviolet rays from the sun, and it acts as a shield to protect us. That was the big concern back in the 90s, that if the ozone layer was starting to get small, we're getting holes in the ozone layer. And that's why they started regulating freon and chlorofluorocarbons, because if that happens, we're going to get more cancer down here because we're exposed to more ultraviolet rays, which are high energy rays from the sun and will, you know, cause a lot of problems.
So all that aerosol stuff that you remember in the news?
Yep.
Right? That was creating an issue and creating a hole in the ozone layer that was protecting us. So they regulated that.
Right.
And that got back to middle, but what's happening now at ground level ozone is frankly harming us.
Right. And now ozone, you didn't see that. It's not something given off by an industry. Industry gives off nitric oxides and volatile organic compounds. They react with sunlight to form ozone. So when it's hotter out in the summer, you get more ozone formation. And so summer, especially during extreme heat events, ozone becomes a bigger problem. So one, you're hot, and that makes it difficult to breathe. And now you've got ozone on top of that, which makes it even harder to breathe. So
there's a relationship, right, between climate change, extreme heat events, which now the state, not only the federal government, is very focused all of a sudden on urban heat island, right? But the state of New Jersey, their first resiliency action plan is on extreme heat and the urban heat island effect. They think that is the #1 public health issue. Extreme heat events actually exacerbate this condition that Ron is describing.
Right. So we don't comply with the ozone standards already. And then you start adding more heat events, then it's going to make the ozone worse. So this is a hazards. As you can see, these are the effects of short-term effects from ozone. And the biggest problem is shortness of breath, wheezing, coughing. So people with asthma or COPD are ones that are going to suffer more from this.
Right.
And city, we have that what we call asthma alley. In the environmental justice communities, there's a very high incidence of people with respiratory illness.
Right. And Ron, what's interesting, you were mentioning before how New Jersey and many of these areas is attainment. It's not meeting the acceptable standards. And I imagine that Jersey City, in probably almost every category, is far worse than the state as a whole, correct?
Yes. And when you're closer to
Simply, yes.
Yeah.
they don't monitor ozone everywhere. They don't monitor it in Jersey City, which is one of the reasons we're going to be. But I'll show you that as well.
Thank you.
So this again is a list of.
So fast forward through some of these charts, Ron.
Yeah.
We have like 20 minutes. So show the chart stuff.
Okay, and here's the long-term exposure risks as well. Some even say evidence has shown that it could reduce or shorten your life, so that it is a problem. And again, children and teens, people 65 and older, and ones with lung disease, asthma, or COPD are the ones that are most at risk. We do have
So we have a lot of vulnerable populations in Jersey City that we don't talk about, right? That are affected by this, which is one of the reasons that we're taking this up.
So just when you thought that was bad, let's talk about particulate matter. That is also a big problem for asthmatics. So you add the particulate matter on with the ozone, and that's, why we have so many problems with breathing problems. So particulate matter is a complex mix. Basically, it's anything that's solid or a liquid drop that you could breathe in. It could be made, so if it's solid, it could come from industry, it could come from the ground, dirt, it could be, quartz, silica, things you call sand. Well, that's a problem. So what they do is they define it by particle size. So you've seen earlier PM10 and 2.5. 10 means the diameter is less than 10 microns. These are the ones that get into your lungs. Larger than that, the cilia up in your throat and whatnot will collect them and push them back out. Less than 10 microns, it'll get into the lungs. The cilia can still protect you. 2.5 gets deep into the lungs and gets stuck in the lungs because it goes by all the protective mechanisms that your body has. So that is the primary concern, is the very, very fine particulates. And they can cause tissue damage and possibly even get into the bloodstream. So what can cause elevated levels of that? Again, it could be primary particulate from an industrial source or a natural source, or it could be a reaction of various gases that then condense out to form a liquid droplet, and you breathe it in. Natural sources are windblown dust, wildfires, tree pollen, mold spores, anything like that. Man-made, we call anthropogenic. And that would include, industrial process, construction sites, unpaved roads, smokestacks, fires, motor vehicle exhausts, all that.
So all this stuff exists in Jersey City, and we're just trying to understand why is it that Jersey City has the highest rate of respiratory illness in Jersey City. Some of this is obvious around what the transportation corridors that envelop the city, in that level of traffic, but there are other aspects of this. So we're going to set up this, stationary monitoring equipment to try to measure the particulate matter and the ozone, and try to get to the root of it.
I'm going to jump through this because, again, you see all.
Yeah, let's just move forward here.
Respiratory illness, all the same things with PM as we had with ozone.
Very bad.
Okay. And one last thing, though, is indoor air quality has been under the news a lot more in the last 10, 15 years, because now you got people, you're smoking cigarettes, you're cooking. They don't realize you got pet dander, you've got candles and incense, upholstered goods in your home. When these get added in addition to whatever's leaking in through the windows and doors, now you have, a lot of people that, like elderly, that are in their home all the time are exposed to a lot of these additional pollutants that, you never thought about. So
And there's just to share, this past weekend we did an environmental justice bus tour, right? And there were experts from Rutgers Environmental Health Institutes who were saying that ozone actually enters into the windows, so outdoor, entering indoor, and having an exchange or an interaction with everything from fragrances to incense that actually causes harmful respiratory ailment factors indoors. So it's not just what's going on outside. And if you figure that what you might do is just stay indoors a lot, you crack the window because you don't have air conditioning, but ozone is getting into buildings and it's causing illness, which is an interesting factor. I didn't realize the degree to which that was happening. And the Rutgers Health Institute suggested that that is happening to a high degree.
Ron, Candy posed an interesting question in the chat. Can masks help with breathing in or reducing the inhalation of particulate matter?
With particulate, possibly. Okay, a lot of the masks we wear for COVID and all that, if you ever look inside it, all the stuff, it goes right in around your nose and everything and collects on the inside. So the mask actually helps to filter out some of that as it's trying to get in through your nose and mouth. When you're breathing, you can look at how it gets dirty on the inside. The problem is these very fine particulates will pass through those masks. Yikes. You've heard N19 or whatever, I don't know.
N95, I think. Is
95, that'll tell you that what size it'll capture and what size will break through. And with ozone, it's not going to help at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is very sobering.
Yes, awfully sobering, and this is useful.
All right.
Okay, so anyone have any questions before we move to the next piece of this?
Hi, this is Camille. I don't think my name's on my avatar or whatever.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, good. No, I just want to mention this, what I read in a book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a very widely read book. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, on the bestseller list for years. That doctor who did extensive research about trauma and so forth, found that those children living with domestic abuse, their own abuse, had much higher levels of asthma. Okay, which was astounding. But I just wanted to throw that in there. So I don't know where the correlation is, but that's what he was quite surprised to discover.
Well, stress of any kind will affect your immune system.
Sure.
And then make you more susceptible to very low air quality or whatever levels, and make it more of a risk to you. Yeah.
And we don't need to be told how much domestic violence there is in our city.
Yeah,
that teacher recently and other young women, yeah.
Awful.
And I want to add one more thing. That train wreck in Ohio, that is so serious.
Yeah.
And I don't think our government is taking it very seriously. In fact, I just saw they were going to have a meeting, town hall meeting, and the railroad company chose not to show up. I mean, is this where we're headed, that there's no accountability? I don't want to get, I'm sorry, don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I just, I wish our government and so forth were a lot more serious about the water we drink, the air we breathe, and take the necessary measures in a big way.
This is why self-advocacy becomes, advocating for yourself and educating people to these concerns to get them in front of these agencies is so important.
So So right now, SJC has started a leadership training program for folks to become really knowledgeable about environmental health and justice issues. There are 15 people in that training program. We got a grant for it. You know, we'll expand the program, but the whole idea is for folks to become more of a self-advocacy ambassadorship, right? You can only do so much. You can inform people, you educate people. People have to actually advocate on their own behalf. And you can't just be on the sidelines and be angry. You actually have to do something about this.
Yeah.
So that's our purpose. We got this grant. We're going to like educate the hell out of the community on this for the next 3 years. People step forward, great. If they don't, well, that's a little bit on them. We're going to do our best to share what we know.
So I'm going to speed up a little bit here. New Jersey does monitor at 30 different monitoring stations. Each one monitors something different. The particulate matter, lead, HAPs, VOCs, those are all manually monitored, so that's not continuous. And these other pollutants are continuously monitored. So these are the locations, the blue dots, and you can see it's more concentrated over where we are. This is Jersey City here. So as you move further out in these areas, Sussex doesn't even have anything. So again, here's the list. The 30 stations, and this is what they monitor listed across the top. You can see Jersey City has CO and NO2 and SO2 at one station, and that is in the overburn communities. And then the firehouse has particulates. And they are starting to replace all these manual particulate monitors with real-time ones now that the technology is available. So we can continuously record that.
So the point of this slide, before everybody's eyes get crossed, all that did was quickly indicate what's being monitored where, right? If you're interested to actually get into that level of detail. The next slide here
That's what we
is
have.
Jersey City specifically, so that you know what's being monitored and where that's being monitored, none of which is monitoring ozone.
And only one place for PM 10 and PM 2.5, which they've implemented a real-time monitor to replace the filter one. Filter means they have to change the filter every day. So you only get
that is up on the
day.
roof. That's up on the roof of a firehouse.
Right.
It's not at ground level.
Right. These are, particulate monitors here, and in some locations at the ground level, but in Jersey City, they're on the roof. So you're putting them 20 feet in the air. So they're not really. So the key is in Jersey City, the purpose of this EPA study is they don't monitor ozone at all. So we don't know what it truly is in the city. And PM is only at one location, 20 feet in the air, not even in the breathing zone. So
in one of the best locations in Jersey City that has the most greenery and is the most oxygenated neighborhood in the city.
Okay.
Just saying, because I live here and that's where the monitor is.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
to just quickly show you, you said the air's quality has cleaned up. That's all I'm showing you with this. The red line is the limit, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. In the past, ozone was exceeded all the time. If you look now, it's exceeded. They even lowered the standard a little bit. It's exceeded a couple of times a year, not as bad as it used to be, much better. And you can see here again in 2020, the amount of exceedances, the old standard, which was 2016, was exceeded 5 times in 2020, but the new standard's only once. Versus if you go back here in 2001, you can see 76 violations. So it is cleaning up. Particulates, again, used to exceed the standard. The federal government has dropped the standard because new health data is out showing that, well, we can clean it up even better if we want to provide, a better health standard here. So they've done that, and they're in compliance even with the new standards. Nitrogen dioxide never exceeded the standards.
So everybody, just like, so that let's just neutralize this, because everybody's eyes cross when they're looking at graphs like this. But it's basically a baseline and then an activity report, right? The red is typically the baseline in the last few graphs that Ron has shown here. And then it shows you if we're above or below.
Right.
That's all this means. It's not more complicated than that.
So being below is good, correct?
Yes. Right. Being above is bad. Being below is good. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. And that's a simple question. And Ron, a different question. I'm so grateful to you for giving us this presentation. What do you do? Are you a teacher, or what do you do?
Well, I was an air quality specialist for 20 years, and then I went into teaching for 21 years, and now I do a little of both for Sustainable Jersey City.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
All right, and then CO again. This is the past. In the past, there were exceedances. Now they're well, and you can see it dropping, getting lower and lower. So it's well below the standards. Lead again, also. Who can tell me why the lead went down so much?
Because of the mandate for unleaded gasoline.
Exactly. And you can see now, so that occurred back in here sometime, and you can see how the numbers dropped significantly. That was a very, useful regulation.
So that was only in the early 90s. I thought it was before that, back in.
It could have been. You can see how high it is up here. Yeah. You can see how high it is in here. So, you did still have some, because the thing is, it has, once they got rid of lead gas, and you can see how low it is here. So I don't know why you had some spikes here. There could have been other industrial sources that were coming in then. And again, here you have for benzene. And again, there isn't really a standard for that, but it's just showing you different places. Elizabeth, New Brunswick. So Elizabeth is the highest. They don't monitor it again in Jersey City. So in the cities, you see higher levels.
And what exactly is benzene?
Benzene's a volatile organic compound, and it is a very carcinogenic one.
Okay, thank you.
Now, so trying to move quicker. So these are all the stations shown here, and EPA has now made this available for any of you. If you want to get email reports every day of what's the air quality in your area, they post it here and they'll send you an email. It's called Air Now. And I have it later on that if you want it, you can type in Google EnviroFlash, or I do have the link later. Oh, sorry.
So we're going to share the presentation. Let's rifle through this next piece of it.
These are the EPA air quality index. So this is what we're going to do also, is use these same levels. And these numbers are just generic, okay, 0 to 50, 51 to 100, because depending on the pollutant, it's going to be different. So you can see green.
So basically it means that it's acceptable or it's not, it's dangerous or it's not. That's what you want to know. And that's what we're going to educate the public around. We're going to create a dashboard for the public to understand this better. And we're going to use these standards to educate folks who are typically not in touch with this information.
So here's the link if you want to start looking at data and getting data from the EPA or the DEP. So I'm just going to keep on. So this is what we're planning to do with the EPA. So they've given us $500,000 to monitor ozone, NO2, nitrogen dioxide, and PM 2.5 over a 3-year period at 3 monitoring locations within these environmental communities of Greenville and Lafayette.
So the
Excellent.
NO2, the NOx, Ron explained that that's kind of a precipitate to ozone, right? Do you want to explain
Right.
what that
We're
is?
only monitoring that because it's not really a major health hazard or at the levels that are in Jersey or the country. The issue is when you have more of the nitrogen dioxide from burning fuels, like in a car, that will be a precursor when you get the sun hitting that to form ozone. So that helps us identify sources by looking at that. So that's why we're doing it. So why are we doing it? Because there's a large number of asthmatics in Jersey City. Climate change is making it worse, and they don't monitor ozone in only one PM10 location. So again, climate change is making this a bigger problem. Hotter days, more hot days, ozone's formed. All right. You also have these storms. The thunderstorms go into the stratosphere if they're severe, and they can pull that ozone down and bring it down to ground level. So then that same ozone becomes a problem.
That's huge because we're having more frequent and intense thunderstorms.
PM, warmer temperatures, longer frost-free growing seasons, and you may not think of it, but pollen is a problem. So you have industrial emissions, you have mobile source emissions all year round. Now make it worse. In May, we're going to have all this pollen out there, and you're already having trouble breathing if you're an asthmatic. Let's throw that in there now. And if it's a longer growing season because we're warming the planet, now you've got an overlap. The elm tree's giving off the same as the beech tree, and they're all at the same time, and you've increased the concentration of these pollens in the air as well. And
so what people should know, and there are a couple of aspects of this, is that climate change and the heat causes trees to throw off more pollen. What the city of Jersey City is looking at right now is what tree species could they plant that would not be as exacerbated, meaning not produce as much pollen in heat events.
Right.
So they're frankly actually looking at this, as are many municipalities, right? Because we know that things are going to heat up. We know that there are going to be more storm events. How do we actually work with nature if we're planting up and trying to restore the canopy with more, trees? Which species should we be planting?
And less male species, because those are the ones that smell the pollen. So
What you said, less male species?
Male species, right. The male tree is the one that produces the pollen.
So,
Really?
so for example, up in the Heights, they planted a huge propensity of male ginkgos. That is producing an extraordinary amount of pollen in the Heights.
Mm-hmm. And then you could.
May I ask both of you? I commend both SJC and the city's Department of Health and Human Services for this, and I know Stacy Flanagan and have a high regard for her. I mean, is her department really on top of this, and do you think they'll be doing a good job with this?
I am so thrilled to be in partnership with them, and everybody's on a learning curve.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean, Bill?
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. The commitment by the Health and Human Services Department to just make every piece of information available to the public is the most we could, hope for right now.
And they're part of the team. And I'll just show you briefly in this how this is all going to play out. So we're trying to find out how's the air quality change across the city in the different neighborhoods. What's hopefully, what's caught, where are these sources of this, and trying to communicate this through a public facing dashboard to the community and bringing the health services in as a player here to say, okay, let's see how many of you use our services, and what other services do we need to help these communities that have such high health problems.
Meaning that they have certain notification systems and information systems, but it may not be the case that folks are resourcing those.
Right.
And we're going to learn about what the best approach might be to notify the public when there are poor air quality conditions. And they're working with us to do that. That's the nature of this grant.
And just quick, incinerators, oil refineries, a lot of trucking facilities, chemical storage all over here in Newark and Elizabeth. And there's the predominant wind direction right towards Jersey City. There's not as much of that in Jersey City, but we have a lot of residential complexes that burn fossil fuels for heating. And that also becomes a problem, a lot of NOx. So we're trying to locate our monitoring equipment to look at this. I don't really have time to go.
Meaning, Ron just spoke about two things. The source, which are buildings, for the most part, emissions in Jersey City. Buildings are the highest emissions generator, up almost to 70%, 67%, I think, where they're at. Then he's talking about directional winds, which this slide is great because it talks to why the west side of Jersey City, for example, is most impacted. There's an inherent corridor that's enveloped by transit or transportation,
Yeah, the ports and the turnpike and
right. But so if
railroads,
you look at that and I'll show it again at the end of this, but Asthma Alley in Jersey City is totally enveloped with main traffic corridors. What this map is pointing to is that the wind direction coming from the west, and particularly the southwest, and through and over the Hackensack to the west side of Jersey City, we're being impacted by everything directly from the west of us. The incinerators, the port's commercial traffic, Newark Airport, the incinerators, all that stuff is being blown on us.
Right.
As well as the new power plant that NJ Transit wants to put up in Kearney, if that gets built.
Yeah, and you know what, Bill? We co-hosted that conversation. You're going to be invited into the next level of the conversation because we've done all the math now. We've spent a month and a half to figure out what some of the options might be. And we have a white paper. I was about to share that with you this week. I'm just out of town, but we'll do that next week before we reach out to Food and Water Watch. You got to read how it is that we're supposed to figure out, the solutions to how we're going to power up the state without fossil fuel. It's going to be a real problem. So we're going to have to figure out some innovative solutions, workarounds, if you will. We'll talk more about that, but that's not this conversation.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to try and finish in a couple of minutes here. I'm going to go by this. By the way, I'm a meteorologist. That's how I got into air quality, because we're the ones who model what's coming out of the smokestacks or the cars and whatever, and see how it affects, based on the weather conditions, the surrounding areas. So this kind of would show that it blows down and hits close. They get hit with the highest concentrations when it's unstable. When it's stable, it goes further and further from the source and takes longer to get to ground level. And that the further sources then can also be impacted. Doesn't matter, how close you are, different conditions cause effects.
Go back to that slide, because this, people should understand, this is different times of day. And like the morning is different than the evening, and how the winds prevail and what's affected. I thought this was a brilliant slide, Ron, not for anything. This really educates people around how, people on the ground are impacted. It either goes above your head or it's coming right at you, depending on time of day and the winds.
Right, or in time of year as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
So-
you for that.
So the EPA took all the industrial sources, this doesn't include car traffic, and they modeled it. And this is what they said for PM 2.5, dark purple right here in Asthma Alley is the highest levels from running computer models to predict where the highest impacts are. Again, same thing here for ozone. So the highest levels were predicted through computer models by the EPA. They take, if you get an air permit, so if you're a major source, in order for you to, to run your operation, you need to get a permit from the state. And then the EPA says, I'm going to take the permit. In your permit, you're limited to emitting a certain amount. So we take those and we throw it into a computer model and say, okay, this is the maximum you're allowed to emit. This is when it's emitted, how it's emitted, and throw it out there and use the local weather data and predict where it's going to hit. And this is what they predicted. So,
And
again,
they've done that. They've done that for every municipality.
this is
out
all
there, so-
available, right?
That was the Jersey City. So within the state of New Jersey, they've done it for every municipality within the state.
Right. So here again, west side, we're hoping to put a monitor in there, something further over on the east side, so we can see how ozone and PM changes across the city, and then possibly something up here.
And how it compares, right?
So that'll help us identify, where the sources are. It won't give us an exact on that, but we can see, because they don't monitor it at all. And they don't monitor it at ground level. So let's see, where is it a problem? Is it a problem everywhere or only in certain locations? Those are the locations that need to be further, maybe put more monitors in to see where this is coming from. And then closer to downtown, if the residential heating systems are becoming a potential major problem because of their NOx.
Because of development and the high rate of
Right.
concentration of new development properties downtown.
Right. So this is what our equipment looks like, a little box here with things, and it's going to have a modem to send it up to the cloud, the data up to the cloud. Solar panels, if we decide to go that way, if we don't have access to, AC power. So basically, the community's involved, and these are the ways they're involved. And so we're educating community members through, we have a leadership training program, which we've already started. We have like 10 or 12 of the community leaders that are
15,
really,
we have 15 in the cohort.
okay. And they're really engaged, and they've been working with us to learn about environmental impacts and how they affect their health. Engage these community members. We're going to have a community steering committee that every month we meet. And
So that's
talk about-
Health and Human Services,
Yeah,
the
I'll show you.
Housing Authority, Rutgers, the Greater
show that on the
Neighborhood
next slide.
Alliance, who used to be the Greenville Neighborhood Alliance, which is at the heart of Asthma Alley, and SJC.
And we're going to develop this whole public facing dashboard using Tembu. And that's similar to, like I said, what
Describe who Tembu is.
Yeah, let me go to the next slide. But like I showed you with EPA with their Air Now program, which gives you alerts based on the state monitor. Now we're going to do one for our monitors, and they will also compare it to the states as well. And we're going to get
much more refined on the ground, Jersey City specific versus generic New Jersey.
And then again, we have citizen scientists working in the field to help us. If we see an alert, high numbers, okay, go out and tell us what's going on. You smell something, you see something going on. And if we have problems with the equipment, they'll be trained to assist with that.
Meaning, as part of the grant, we are hiring 3 field people and a field manager to oversee, so 4 people to make sure that the equipment is reporting properly, and if there are spikes, to help us understand why.
So this is kind of a visual. Here's your data collection here. It goes to a facing dashboard. Our community steering committee is going to be evaluating the data. The data goes out to residents. They can look it up on their phone. If they see, hey, there's the fire over here, they can go onto it and put that data and information into the dashboard. So we have that as a way of identifying sources, or if they smell something, they can put that in here. The field technicians will also be responsible for giving us that information. The vendor will be looking at the data weekly as well as monthly to make sure the equipment is operating properly, so we're not sending out false alerts that the data is quality data.
So the big picture here is that this is about data collection. We've partnered with a private sector technology company called Tembu, who is going to develop a community dashboard to report out to the community all of what they need to know. And on the back end, we've partnered with the city of Jersey City, right, to develop some form of a reporting system which was never existent in Jersey City before. This is a learning project. It's a 3-year grant. We're going to see what we could do. You know, there's a lot to pull together here. This
Right.
is the first conversation we're having with the public about this.
Yeah, this is tremendous. How are you going to be recruiting these field technicians? Because it seems
We've almost already hired, you know, 3 or 4 people have applied for this through NJCU.
right.
Some
Okay.
some college people and some community people who would like to participate on behalf of their communities.
Okay, great. And you think they're good people?
We're about to interview them. We're going to come back to you on that, Bill, if you have some recommendations.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm sure NJCU, St. Peter's, you know, Eileen Piani is on the email list.
Yes.
And she should be sharing it with the students there who are, and biology professors.
Yes. So two things about this. One, we definitely need some, you know, eyes on the ground, but we want to teach people about this stuff. So if there are college students that have some interest in environmental studies, this is a great opportunity for them to be coached by Ron and the equipment manufacturer to crawl inside the data collection aspect of this and why it's so important for public reporting. So we're trying to engage people as an education opportunity, you know, for people, but you know, not everybody, to be honest, not everybody's interested in this stuff. You know, the people on this call, maybe, but there are a lot of people who are not interested in this stuff at all.
Right. But I'm glad that Sharuk is on with us. And Sharuk, you're only a high school 10th grade student, I think. But it's so important that young people like you get involved in this because you're the future.
You're a high school student, Sharuk?
Yes.
And would you like to work with us?
He said he did, and I actually took a screenshot of his email address, so we have it.
Okay, good. So you reach out to him, Ron. Very good.
Okay. And just so real quick, Tembu, if you look in the corner here, they'll put out a daily report that will show like a graph, and it'll, you know, be for air quality, okay, purple or green or red, and then they'll have some narrative to go if you're going to be exercising, today's not a good day, or wait until after a certain time. So this data is all available, and people like our field technicians can dial up onto this as well and put in information if they're identifying, you know, there's an adverse problem going on in associated with the high numbers that we're reading. So And then that goes into monthly reports that we help put together to distribute to the community. And there's been a lot of positive stuff here. Real-time data of the Tembu sensors revealing just how effective our green roofs are at capturing stormwater, so they can look at mitigative programs. I thought the biggest one here, Tembu is provided with an incredible opportunity to connect and empower the community, not just by giving our residents access to precise, high-quality data on environmental health risks, but giving them the voice to communicate this data to the community. So they have access, they have input, and trying to make it user-friendly enough that they will use it, and they'll start using it and realize, hey, this is really good. I can, self-advocate now to not go out and because it's a bad air quality day, and rather than going out and running through the park and realizing like, oh, now I'm sick when I go home and I can't breathe,
So Tembu is located in Tribeca in New York City. They sought out SJC to do a project. We have been for about 9 months now having conversations with them, and then we wrote them into the grant based on their capabilities, and we're very excited to work with them. These are some of the testimonials around people who've worked with them previously, which have mostly been in New York City. So we're taking it forward with this particular platform. We think it's a good bet, highly recommended. We're very excited. Again, this is a learning curve for SJC too. Right. So any feedback about the discussion tonight is mostly, sort of a practice run for us, but it's highly appreciated.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff it's kind of thick. There's a particular way that maybe we need to break this down for the public. So any feedback from you guys would be most appreciated.
Yeah, I tried signing up for the Enviro Flash, but it said something like, no cities within 100 miles of your zip code, and which I found rather astonishing.
Ron, is Enviro Flash the same as the other service that you pointed to for the EPA on your presentation?
That's the one on the EPA, but I have it, I get it, but I get it for Oakland because that's where I live.
You're saying that, so are you saying that there's no EnviroFlash for Jersey City?
There should be. Maybe it's
could we look at that?
Try Air Now. Try just going to Air Now and looking that up and see.
Air Now.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Bill. So that's a good heads up.
Air Now, New Jersey came up, and then state Air Now. So yeah, so if you go to Air Now, New Jersey, then it gives you information for all different locations, but I'm sure there's a way to sign up.
Okay.
Connect Us. Yeah, so yeah, go to Air Now, New Jersey and see if you can sign up with that. And you'll get, and it tells you what the weather is and gives you predictions for the next day. Ours doesn't have the ability for prediction. But we will be looking at the data to be able to, present enough information where people who dial into it get information they need to evaluate the health for that day.
Yeah, and we're actually going to look at this all together. Thank you also, Gladys, for joining us. Gladys is one of the leadership training cohort members, right, who lives frankly in Asthma Alley. So looking at how we're trying to sort of learn together, we don't have all the answers right now. We're just trying to figure out a project that we can report back to the public, and we'll appoint that. Year one is going to be definitely a learning curve for us, but we'll get better at this. Right? So I'm kind of holding it that the people who are on this call are those most interested, and we can circle back and share information and learn together. So thank you very, very much.
Okay, so is that it? I mean, Ron, this has
Yeah.
been a fantastic presentation, and thank you so much. And I look forward to getting the presentation. I'll be sharing them not just with the Green Committee, which is an email list of 79 people. How many ever look at the emails I send out is questionable. But
Well, that's just an internal group with the Journal Square Community Association, right?
Right, right. But I'll share it.
We'll send out the presentation to our entire listserv.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So Deb, just tell me where you want me to put it in the Google folder or whatever.
Put it in our Google Drive, and then I'll share it with Bill, and then we'll put it in the newsletter.
Okay, great.
Rock and roll.
Okay.
Thanks for your attention. I know it was a bit long, but
Yeah, that was tremendous.
Hopefully it wasn't too much information.
No. It was good.
That was great.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you
Bye
very
now.
much. And thanks
Yeah,
everyone for attending.
Yeah.
Bye
now.
for now.
Bye.
Thank you, Ron.
Oh, thanks.
That was great. So let's catch up over the next couple of days. This was really great. So just send me on Slack the link so I can share the presentation.
Yeah, I haven't put it into our Google Docs yet. It's in my own personal one because I didn't know where to put it. So if you in Slack or whatever, just give me the link to where you want it, the folder, and I'll put it in there as a Google Doc, and then I'll download and upload the PowerPoint that you can share.
Perfect.
Tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to Awake, and then Friday, I'll be in a funeral for and stuff most of the day.
All right, we'll get it out to people at the beginning of next week.
Okay.
All right, that sounds
Good.
great.
Well, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, and sorry for your loss, not knowing who that is, but
my brother's father-in-law, but our families are all very close. So, we always did holidays and stuff together. So, it's hard for him and his wife.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. I gotcha.
Appreciate it.
All right. I'm sending energy your way.
Okay. Take care. All right.
All right. Bye for now.